Welcome, everyone. My name is Grace Karmani, Sloan Fellows, class of 2016. And I'm very pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Ben Shields. Ben Shields is a senior lecturer in managerial communication at MIT Sloan. He teaches communication for leaders, social media management, persuasion in networked culture, and advanced leadership communication in the MBA program. He also teaches a variety of MIT Sloan executive education courses, including analytics management, business lessons from the sports data revolution, and communication and persuasion in the digital age. Senior lecturer Shields' research focuses on the intersection of social media technologies, analytics, and audience behavior in the sports, media, and entertainment industries. He's written 3 books. His most recent was released earlier this year and is titled Social Media Management, Persuasion in Network Culture. Previously, he served as the Director of Social Media and Marketing at ESPN. He holds a BS, an MA in Communication Studies, and a PhD in Media, Technology, and Society, all from Northwestern University. Today, Senior Lecturer Shields joins us to share a glimpse of a coherent framework that offers a clear model for developing strategies to maximize the business value of social media. Please join me in welcoming Ben Shields.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Grace, for your kind introduction. Let me add my own welcome back to all of the alums in the room. I've been here at MIT Sloan for 3 years now, and I've been struck by the strength, the warmth, and the loyalty of our community. And the fact that everybody is here on day 1 of the reunion weekend is a testament to our community. I've had the great fortune of working in the social media space as a practitioner, as a researcher, and now as a teacher for, believe it or not, the better part of 10 years. And there have been a few constants in my work. Cats, kids, and selfies. Probably the best selfie of all time. But beneath this veneer of fun and seeming trivia, there are powerful forces in communication at play in this new digital age. I'm sure everyone in this room has seen plenty of studies about the amount of time that we all spend in digital and social media. Nielsen came out recently with its 2016 social media report, and it says that adults age 18 and over spend about 5 hours and 30 minutes per week in social media, representing about 20% of their total media time, and that's a year-over-year increase of about 30%. Those of you in the room with kids probably would say that that's even greater for that population. You might also summarize that particular report about the time that we all are spending in social media with this photo. Take any subway ride, you see that people are absolutely glued to their phones. And digital and social media is one of the ways that they pass the time. Now, from a business standpoint, it's clear that we have to be there. We have to be there. When I first started working in digital and social, there was a debate, and by the way, debate with good arguments on both sides, of whether brands, firms, nonprofits should be in the social media space. But given the broad changes in the way that we all communicate, the question is not if you should be there. The question is how. And so what I thought we would do in our time together today is try to explore that question of how. Now, to be clear, I'm so honored to be with all of you because this is a room full of successful, extremely smart people. What I want to do is share some of the concepts and cases that we've been working on here at MIT Sloan. It may help evolve some of your thinking, may challenge some of your thinking, may validate some of your thinking. But everything that I'm going to share today is sort of hot off the presses from my course this spring on social media management. It's actually a fabulous course to teach because although some of the fundamental principles and concepts stay the same, every single year we have new cases and we have new trends in platforms. So to that end, I do want to define a little bit what is persuasion in the digital age and talk about the promise and peril of persuasion in the digital age. Then I want to spend some time discussing some platform possibilities and trends. I spent an entire 3-hour session on platforms. We're not going to do that today, but I do want to point out some key trends that are operating in the industry. And then, as Grace alluded to, we've developed this social media management framework, which is not intended to win the Nobel Peace Prize, but is intended to help organizations and leaders develop smart, sound, and efficient social media strategies to persuade more effectively. And then finally, we will do a little bit of wrap-up. Whenever I have a session, I typically have a couple of goals. One is to have fun. 2 is learn a little thing. And also, 3 is for it to be interactive. So if anyone has a question, a challenge, a comment, raise your hand, let me know, and I get to throw this thing to you. I did do some shoulder warm-up, so I'm all good. If we need to go to the back room, I see you right there. If we need to go to you, I'll get it to you. So please, this is how we'll do the Q&A. All right, so persuasion in the digital age. Thank you to the Sloan alumni team for this title. It's a great one. But what does it actually mean? So just so we're on the same page, I wanted to share a basic definition of persuasion. And the way that we see it is it's the art and science of influencing an audience to believe, feel, and/or do something. Okay? We generally on the same page with that as a definition of persuasion. Now, what's happened in the digital age is that there's some new persuasive dynamics at play here. Some new persuasive dynamics at play. Okay? Media is now two-way, not just broadcast media, but many-to-many media. Everyone in this room effectively is your own media company. Public. That screenshot function on your phone or your computer is extremely valuable, and especially for firms everywhere, assuming that everything that you put in writing can go public anytime is a good standard operating procedure. Communication is immediate. The feedback is instantaneous. Communication is networked. Sharing from friend to friend happens very quickly and is accelerated in the digital age. Visual, new visual dynamics. Everyone in this room has a very powerful camera and video camera in your pocket. This is a very visual culture in the digital age. And then finally, a final characteristic here is disintermediated. We no longer just need to go to the 3 broadcast TV networks for information, or the few newspapers, or the few magazines. Everyone seemingly can be a source of information, for better or for worse. So to apply some of these new persuasive dynamics in the digital age, I wanted to look at a couple of cases. Now again, these are cases that we discussed in our class this spring. The first is regarding this tweet. Now, anyone familiar with Wendys and Nugs for Carter? A few people. Someone that isn't. If you get this, let me ask you this question, okay, if you don't mind. Let's say you're running the Twitter account for Wendys, and you see this tweet, "Yo, Wendys, How many retweets for a year of free chicken nuggets? What do? You pick a number. Where would you go? 20,000. Oh, I like it. So that's, where would you go?
I think the answer was 1 million or something. That's what we.
You pick a period?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
It's a competition. How many can you get in a month?
X number of time. Okay. All right. Well, this is good. So everybody wants to engage, which is helpful. Everybody wants to engage. And Wendys made that decision to engage. Keep in mind, this kid, by the way, high schooler, not exactly the social media influencer of our time. He sent this tweet as a joke for his friends. Wendys gets back, says 18 million. I mean, that is a lot of retweets. 18 million. And here's Carter Wilkerson, straight up saying, consider it done. Screenshot function here comes in handy for him. And this becomes his tweet that hopefully will get him the free nuggets for a year. Interesting social phenomenon here. Because I don't have to tell anyone in this room, we often are a very divided society, especially in this country today. But Nugs for Carter was one cause that every American could rally behind. Aaron Paul, actor from Breaking Bad, saw inspiration in Carter. CEO of T-Mobile saw this as an opportunity. Other brands got involved. Hollister, I'm still trying to figure this out for my own life. Thank you for that. And what happened here is that you had this combination of influential people, brands, and regular, normal Twitter users retweeting in support of this cause. Amplifying this even further was Ellen DeGeneres, who, as you'll see here, had some skin in the game as well.
Hi, I'm Ellen DeGeneres.
And I'm Bradley Cooper.
We need your help.
Elle and I are dangerously close to losing our title for the most retweeted tweet of all time.
This nugget kid needs your help to reach his goal, but we need your help more.
We put our heart and our soul into that selfie. I had to hold my arms up like this for about 35 to 40 seconds. My biceps were shaking.
And I was sitting on Meryl Streep's lap for an uncomfortably long time.
We earned this title, and we're not going to lose it now.
Please retweet our selfie.
Do it today and be a part of history.
To show how much we need your help, Bradley is going to rub my shoulders.
I am?
Yep.
Well, how does that?
Just do it.
Okay.
Get retweeting, everybody. Okay. A little harder. That's good. That's good. That's right. That's good. Thank you.
All right. To give you the conclusion of how this all played out, Carter didn't actually reach 18 million retweets. However, he did become the most retweeted tweet of all time on Twitter, as indicated by this graphic made by Twitter. And interestingly enough, you can sort of see how this built over time too, compared to the original Oscars tweet from Ellen. Wendys ended up saying, okay, we're going to give you the free year of chicken nuggets. We're also going to make a donation to the Dave Thomas Foundation, which is the Wendys founder, of $100,000. And Carter did get his wish. So it's a fun case to walk through. What is the business value to Wendys? Why would Wendys do this?
Awareness.
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 Okay. Let me ask you this question. Awareness was definitely at play here. How do you think this type of awareness compares to a traditional TV commercial, a print ad, a radio spot, maybe a digital advertisement? What's at play here? What makes potentially, and you can push back, by the way, but what makes this type of awareness from this campaign different from potentially a traditional media campaign?
But this is authentic. This is made by the customers.
So it's the customers that are spreading the message for Wendys, right? We can pass it down.
No, it's,
There we go. Excellent. Well done. Well done. Any other points about the business value to Wendys as a result here? Cost. Say more about that.
They didn't start it,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't cost them money, and also it's in a short period of time, so it lasts more than a paper ad
Right.
or a commercial, and this lasted a month, and it
Yeah.
went from 1 to 3 million in less than a month.
Right, right. So we're hearing, first of all, the awareness that was created is more credible because it comes from the customers. And we're also hearing that this is more cost effective, right? It didn't cost the social media manager that's behind the Wendys Twitter feed anything except for her time to propose 18 million, right? And especially compared to some of the costs for traditional integrated media marketing campaigns today, the $100,000 in the free chicken nuggets is pennies. Okay? Anything else on this? You had your hand up, Peter.
Yeah, there's social proof here too.
I'm sorry, what's that?
There's social proof in flavor.
Ah, so talk more about that.
Well, it's not Wendy's. It's not Wendy's saying that their chicken nuggets are in demand. It's
Right,
a whole lot of people saying it,
that's right.
and it's millions of people saying it.
Yeah. So in the field of social contagion, what makes things viral? Social proof, the idea that, well, if other people are doing it, it must be a good idea, is definitely at play here as well. Yes, in the back. Good question. Good question. And I don't know the answer to that question. What you might say, though, is try to understand the correlation between chicken nuggets sold during this time period versus previous time periods. And you would be able to get a sense of what that correlation is. Whether Wendys is able to measure causation is another matter. That said, if I'm sitting in the seat of the social media manager or the CMO, and I say I'm able to generate reach, impressions, engagement for a low cost, then that's a much more efficient marketing spend. So there's operational value there as well. Ideally, you can prove causation that more people bought chicken nuggets as a result. But within the context of the overall marketing budget, it's a little bit more efficient. You had something.
I was going to make a point similar to New Gaze, but
Yeah.
the other thing, Maybelline did something similar with a woman who, I don't know, had a bunch of followers on Twitter.
Yep.
He got her a beach house on the Hamptons in the summer,
Yep.
and she's like 20-something and told her she could invite all her friends up there. And they had direct attribution to that campaign, and the payoff was like, 20x, 30x.
Yeah.
And they could directly link it to that campaign.
Yeah, yeah, and that's an important field of study for anything that's awareness related. How do you attribute it to direct sales. And I'd be willing to suggest that Wendys maybe saw a little bit of bump here, but I don't know the answer to that question. Tor.
Do you know if they got more followers as a result?
Yes. Yes.
You know, many.
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
But that's value in itself.
That is value as well. Audience building over time. Yeah. One more, and then we'll move on.
This would be way more widespread.
Mm-hmm.
You can only put out so many paper ads, and even then, maybe not everyone will see that. But on Twitter, it's almost as if everyone is on Twitter, and even people who are not on Twitter have friends on Twitter, and then it just spreads and it keeps on spreading, so it's so much easier to market on Twitter with something like this.
Excellent point. What year are you?
In 7th grade.
All right. Let's talk in about 10 years. One thing I do want to make the point of, and by the way, thank you for that analysis. One thing I do want to make the point of is that this was, and I apologize, I won't use too many sports metaphors, but I have to use one here. This was a grand slam, right? But Wendys has had a history of hitting singles and doubles. Okay? When you look back at their Twitter feed, there's constant interaction with their followers. So here's one example. Anyone from Burger King in the room? Okay, good. So there they had a little bit of Burger King versus Wendy's spat about, the price of how many hamburgers. And basically one Twitter user said, Wendy's, what are you firing back to Burger King's point about 5 for $4 because 5 is better than 4? Wendy's fired back with, well, they're providing edible food. And also, earlier this year, Nick just asked Wendys to spit some rhymes, and so I'm not going to butcher this by doing it myself, but suffice to say it is a rhyme that I think is to a Coolio song, although I'm not sure. We have confirmation? Thank you, Gangster Paradise. Okay, excellent. Do you want to say that, or are you going to recite it? Are you going to spit those? Oh, okay, very good. All right, go. All right. So this is definitely an example where the two-way, public, immediate, networked, visual, and disintermediated persuasive context can help firms. There's also a flip side. And to be clear, I'm showing a couple different extremes. Most people sort of operate in the middle, but I'm showing a couple different extremes. This is another case that we dissected in class this year, and it involves United. I'm going to show the video. I toyed with this, but the reality is the video is an important piece of the analysis of this case. So let's take a quick look.
Can't they run a car with the pilots and have them drive?
Hey, come on. Come on. Gotta go. Hey, busted his lip.
Oh my God, look at what you did to him. Oh my God. Oh my
Good work, guys. Good work. Way to go.
This is horrible.
Of course, we just walked the line.
Oh my
Yeah, the police grabbed the guy.
Jesus.
He's an older doctor. He wouldn't get off the plane.
Oh.
And so they forced him off.
All right. So for those of you that don't know, the flight was overbooked. Per United policy, they are allowed to remove booked passengers so that United staff can fly. And this is what happened in this particular situation. And we have the video evidence. Now, as we walk through sort of the timeline of this crisis, I'll just be honest, it's really easy to analyze crises in hindsight. really easy. So we're going to do this with a wink and a nod, right? Because if you're in the moment, things are tough. That said, I do think we can talk about some of the communication choices along the way and what we can learn from them. No matter what, I say as the last caveat before we get into this, is there is significant damning evidence against United here. No PR, communication, persuasive guru is going to truly get United out of this bind, okay? So I just want to level set as it relates to before we go into this. That said, there are some learnings here, I think, in terms of how maybe traditional communication strategies may not work as effectively in the social media space. Are we okay with my disclaimers? All right, cool. All right, so this happened Sunday night, right? And there was a statement at the Louisville Courier, which was the arriving airport for this flight, basically saying something to the effect of what they used on Twitter, which is they apologized for the overbooked situation. Further details on the removed customer should be directed to authorities. And this was kind of the operating statement on Twitter. Apologize, but let's talk to the authorities about that. Well, the problem is that Twitter users weren't accepting that quote-unquote corporate speak. By the way, might have been legally the right thing to do. But in this day and age, there are some Twitter users that aren't necessarily going to accept that. So here's one particular GIF that... All right. So finally, though, by Monday, you got a formal apology from the CEO of United. And this was tweeted out. This is an upsetting event to all of us here at United. I apologize for having to reaccommodate these customers. Our team is moving with a sense of urgency to work with the authorities and conduct our own detailed review of what happened. We are also reaching out to this passenger to talk directly to him and further address and resolve the situation. What's your take on this statement? Tone deaf. Okay, so why?
Well, it's clear from the response of the Twitterverse that most people feel that that situation was not handled appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I think most leaders do when they see that they're not doing something appropriately and it has been socially designated, so it's just do a mea culpa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one of the challenges here, and I think it's fair to say that the choice of the terms reaccommodate these customers. By the way, to make a somewhat obvious point, but I feel like I need to make it anyway, those words could potentially work in a pre-social media era, but we had visual evidence about what reaccommodate customers means. But it's an important point. Okay, so one of the key topics in any crisis management is what is the truth? There's no debate about what the truth is. There could be nuances there, but there was a man who was pulled off a plane and he was bloodied, right? And reaccommodate was a term that definitely was taken out of context and arguably rightfully so. Well, that didn't set well with the Twitterverse either. That's a tough go. And to make matters a little bit worse, that night there was a leaked memo that Oscar Munoz had sent to his employees regarding the situation. Again, audience, internal employees. Actually, if you read the memo, he was a little less tone deaf. You know, there was some remorse there. I could kind of get the sense that this mattered to him, and this was not a good reflection on United. However, there was a summary at the end of his note with more words that set the internet on fire. And each time he refused and became more and more disruptive and belligerent. Another example of how those types of words can be taken out of context in the social media space, and you find on certain publications that as a result of that report, United blames the victim. So now we have a situation where the initial apology wasn't as direct, remorseful as it may need to have been. And this internal memo is framing the debate in the way that the victim was actually at fault. The next day, the shareholder value for United plummeted quite considerably. And that forced the CEO to put out another statement about fixing this. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can tell that at least some of the tone-deaf approach previously was rectified. The truly horrific event that occurred on this flight has elicited many responses from all of us: outrage, anger, disappointment. I share all of those sentiments, and one above all, my deepest apologies for what happened. Munoz then went on an exclusive interview to ABC News where he addressed some of the issues head on, and I'll play just a couple minutes of it.
Oscar, this incident has sparked outrage around the world. There are calls this morning to boycott your brand. What did you think when you saw that video of a man being dragged off of one of your planes?
Oh, good morning, and thank you for having me. It's not so much what I thought, it's what I felt. Probably the word ashamed comes to mind. You know, as I think about our business and our people, the first thing I think is important to say is to apologize to Dr. Dow, his family, the passengers on that flight, our customers, our employees. That is not who our family at United is. And you saw us at a bad moment. And this will never happen again on a United Airlines flight. That's my premise and that's my promise.
Why not communicate that shame, as you call it initially? In your initial apology, in your initial statement, you apologized for reaccommodating passengers. And in your internal notes to your employees, you talked about a belligerent and disruptive passenger. Why did it take until Tuesday to offer a more full-hearted apology?
I think my first reaction to most issues is to get the facts and circumstances. And my initial words fell short of truly expressing what we were feeling. And that's something that I've learned from. The expression of apology, and specific to the folks I mentioned before, is an important part of a conversation like this because, again, that shame and embarrassment was pretty palpable for me and for a lot of our family.
All right. So I've taken you through some of the key phases of the crisis. We've seen how it played out. If United had the opportunity to do this over again, what would you advise them to do? Yes, please, in the back.
Just be more personal, more human.
Be more personable and human in your responses. Okay, very good. What else?
Well, once United has boarded all the passengers, you can't unboard them. It's quite different from denying boarding in the first place. They should have rented a private plane to move the crew.
So, very good point. Review the policy and ensure that you can communicate that upfront and quickly about the changes that you're going to make, which with what seems like an arcane policy, an arcane and potentially inhuman policy. Yes, we haven't heard from over here. Please.
It seems to me that currently and probably 20, 25 years ago, his first level of consultation was to a lawyer. He was very lawyerly. He was lawyering himself up. Instead, I think he would have been better served going to his best PR person who has social media savvy and said, forget our legal obligation. Let's just go with a PR good spin, right? Because you could tell he was ill-advised.
Excellent point, and I appreciate and understand that the legal perspective in crises is critical to consider. I understand that, and I, by no stretch of the imagination, want to appear naive to say that you completely discount it on all levels. That said, when you're in a situation where the evidence is clear and the truth is damning, to your point, taking another approach that is a little bit more human and responsive could have been more effective in this situation. Yes, please, blue shirt.
Yes, I actually find this interview very compelling, where he looks like almost he's about to cry. And had he posted an interview within 24 hours, it would have not only put a person on the other side of it, but it would have given a face to the airline, and what's coming out is not corporate speak.
Excellent point. That first two statements that I showed you, did Oscar write those?
No.
I mean, we don't know, right? But our perception is that he didn't. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of video in digital here in a minute. But excellent point. Taking advantage of the channels and how people are consuming information now, and video being a big format, would have been a very nice approach to this particular issue. Tor, please.
So my girlfriend works in the marketing department at United.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it was a blast. So we talked a lot about this, especially in light of the fact that I took your course.
Oh, thank you. All right.
I told her immediately that the first 24 hours were a disaster, and she agreed. Her concern, and so my question to you, is that you can see there's some consistency between the internal memo and the initial response, which, as he said himself, fell short. The big issue that they were facing before this crisis is relationship with frontline employees, keeping flight attendants, gate agents happy, and that had been a very contentious relationship after the merger. So my question is, what do you do if you're a company in a position of maintaining an outward presence, like a social media account, also needing to communicate internally, especially to frontline employees who were somewhat responsible for the interaction, at least calling in the police? How do you balance it so at least you're consistent? Because you don't want to be insensitive, but you don't want to also appear like you're lying to one side or the other. That could also be a disaster.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I think it comes down to audience. And we are now in a situation where any piece of communication in the digital age ought to consider who your primary audience is, who your secondary audience is, and who your tertiary audiences are. And for that internal memo, there was one audience targeted, and that was the internal employees. But in designing that piece of communication, there also should be a question of, well, if our secondary audience of customers sees this, how are they going to respond? And so I don't think we have the benefit of just being able to communicate with one audience in today's digital age. We have to account for multiple of them in pieces of communication, especially in a situation like this. All right. So this is another example of how the two-way, the public, the visual, the networked, the disintermediated communication culture that we live in is affecting firms and leaders. And unfortunately, in this instance, it was a perilous example for United. I do want to mention as well that just like Wendys had a history of interacting with fans, United was also coming off of another challenging crisis a few weeks before. I won't go into too much detail on this one, but there was an internal rule that stipulated people that fly on companion passes, you're a family member of a flight attendant or a staff member, have to adhere to a dress code. And there was a situation on a flight where 2 teenage girls were wearing leggings, which put them at odds with what the dress code was for companion pass flyers, and they were refused entry on the plane. And someone, Shannon Watts, who has a decent-sized Twitter following, was live tweeting this incident, and it caught steam, as phenomena sometimes do in the social media space. And United again found itself in a little bit of trouble. Tone deaf was another critique that we heard in class and that we've seen in the trades about how their response was. Specifically talking about their contract of carriage, Rule 21, we do have the right to refuse transport for passengers who blah, 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 blah. So my point is that, yes, these 2 cases of Wendys Nugs for Carter and of United Dr. Dow are no question flashpoints. But you also have to consider the broader context, and both Wendys and United had been dealing with similar situations, but with different results. And so we talked about all these different dynamics and illustrated how these could be positives and or negatives for companies. And if I can just crystallize this conversation a little bit to one takeaway that I think is important for any firm or any leader. And to be clear, this takeaway is not necessarily the newest takeaway on earth, but it does have renewed importance in the digital age. And that is design brands, products, services, and experiences that people will share with their networks. Design brands, products, services, and experiences that people will share with their networks. This is word of mouth, but it's word of mouth on steroids. And we just showed 2 different examples of how quickly and how publicly messaging can circulate in the social media age. And it's on us in the business and nonprofit world to think about, well, how are people going to share what I create or what I deliver? One way to refine your thinking on how to get people to share your messaging or your products is to better understand the platforms where people are spending time. And I just thought I'd give you a sense of what some of the platform possibilities out there. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these, but I do want to hit a few trends that are important. Of course, we've got the Facebook family, which includes Instagram, Messenger, as well as WhatsApp. The sheer scale that Facebook has amassed in its short time as a company is pretty remarkable. All 4 of those platforms have significant audience scale. We have YouTube that has evolved from a consumer-generated platform largely, and now moving into the space of the future of television, in part with their $35 a month YouTube TV package. Good old Twitter. Any Twitter lovers in here? It's nice to see all of you. Not a lot. But Twitter has had some challenges in driving user growth. It's been stuck at sort of the 300 million monthly active user mark for quite some time now, and that hasn't necessarily made Wall Street happy. But it's doubling down on a live video strategy, and hopefully that will work for them. Snapchat, parent company Snap. It is an app with high user engagement among a typically young audience. But unlike Facebook and Instagram, that audience is comparatively smaller, about in the 166 million monthly active users. Is that pretty much on tour who used to work at Snapchat? Daily active users? Yeah, that's correct. Pinterest, which is a visual search platform, Been an interesting journey for them as they view search not necessarily being about text, but being about visuals. An interesting trend for Pinterest going forward. LinkedIn, which was acquired by Microsoft, still has relevance and is a primary place for B2B marketers to maximize some business value of social media. Tumblr and Reddit, two very strong internet communities. Tumblr is more of a arts and pop culture community, whereas Reddit is where some of the major internet trends start. Slack, which started as a messaging app and has now grown quite considerably to potentially be, if not an email killer, an email complement. WeChat, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, is a messaging app in China that is really on the cutting edge of where social media platforms are headed. Twitch, Amazon-owned Twitch, which is a esports live viewing platform. You basically go on there to watch other people play video games. Something that you could consider this evening. Musically, another app that skews a little bit younger. It's basically an app that enables you to make your own lip-syncing videos. And Lively, which is owned by Musical.ly as well, and this is a live streaming app. Now, this isn't everything. I don't want to bore you with every single platform that's out there, but there are a lot of platform possibilities. Now, to try and crystallize some of the trends that we're seeing in platforms, and again, this is coming from a lot of the discussions that we had in our MBA course this spring. I think number one is social media is becoming a social video platform. Video is the dominant form of content on networks like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, increasingly Instagram, increasingly Snapchat, in part because it's a very monetizable content format. This is an example that will be airing here in a little bit. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is going to be streamed live on Facebook, so a full-length movie on Facebook. It's sponsored by Domino's, where if the more friends you invite to watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off on Facebook, the better discount you get for pizza. Sort of a social promotion. But the point here is that Facebook is investing in live content, it's investing in premium content, and it's not just Facebook. Twitter, as well as YouTube, are producing original shows, acquiring live sports rights, starting 24/7 news channels. Bloomberg will be on Twitter. So the future of television, in part, is happening in some of these major social media platforms. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. Another trend is these all-in-one messenger applications. I mentioned WeChat. WeChat has about 850 monthly active users, 850 million monthly active users in China. And it started as a messaging app. But what makes it fascinating is it combines Uber, Amazon, your bank, Netflix, all in one app. To the point where, just anecdotally, some of my students from China will say to me, this is the one app that I cannot live without, because everything is built into this mobile operating system. Facebook's Messenger is sort of seeing the potential that WeChat has exhibited, and you'll start to see more features added on to Facebook Messenger to mimic the all-in-one solution that WeChat provides. A third trend is in frictionless and imperfect sharing. So when you got a social media post on Instagram or Facebook, you got to make sure it's perfect. You're worried about the likes and the comments. You got to get that feedback right. Well, Snapchat initially said, we actually are going to design something different for our users. We're going to design a stories feature that makes it really easy for you to share photos and video about your day on a minute-to-minute basis if you want. And you're not going to need to get feedback on it, right? People aren't going to like or comment on your content. This is just a way for you to continue to share as much about your life as possible on the Snapchat platform. So to give you an example of this stories feature, which is all about getting more social media users to share more content on their platform, here's an example from DJ Khaled, who has been a prolific Snapchat user in demonstrating the value of this format.
Alright, it's dark. In a minute, there ain't gonna be no lights to navigate us to where we need to go. I'm gonna check in with y'all. Alright? It's pitch black out here. Put the flash on the phone. If y'all know Jay-Z, tell her to call me. The key is to make it. The key is to make it. It's so dark out here, we don't know where the hell we at, but the key is to make it. The key is never give up. It's not easy to win. I know that. It's so real out here right now. The only reason why you see anything is because I got the flash on. We will succeed. The key is not to drive your jet ski in the dark. This is against the law, not even just that. This ain't right.
All right, so you can see how the stories feature functions. It's intended for that frictionless and imperfect sharing. DJ Khaled did make it out okay. This stories feature has been so successful for Snapchat that Instagram has been very upfront in saying that they directly copied it from Snapchat. Facebook has also implemented the stories feature on its other platforms, including Facebook proper, WhatsApp, as well as Messenger. So this is a really important new user behavior that encourages frictionless and imperfect sharing. Final trend that I wanted to emphasize here with platforms is there are enhanced creativity tools. Remember I made the point earlier that we're all, for better or for worse, our own media companies. And what these platforms are doing, giving you new tools to create better and more interesting content. So Snapchat has been at the forefront of using augmented reality technology to take the photos and videos that you create and layer on top of them different digital objects. If you want to put a rainbow on top of your picnic, that is now possible through World Lenses. And I also mentioned the Musical.ly app. This is an app where it makes it very easy for you to create your own music video. Here is one as part of the Here Challenge, which is a popular song of this past spring.
And I don't want to get with you, so tell my friends that I'll be over here. Oh, here. Oh, here. Oh, I ask myself, what am I doing here? Oh, here.
All right. So what you're seeing in some of these platforms is they're making it very easy for people to create content to share with their friends. Again, this is about creating experiences and products and services that people are willing to share with their friends. Now, lots of different platform possibilities here. And I'm not suggesting that every firm or organization needs to be on every single one. Especially for some of our recent graduates, you're familiar with this concept, FOMO. The fear of missing out. It is a syndrome that afflicts business schools across the world. And I would submit to you that there is an analog to how you might think about platforms. And a second key takeaway here is that there are lots of different platforms out there, lots of different trends, but I would encourage you to avoid your own platform FOMO. That is, there is a great sense of all the new possibilities out there, amazing platforms, but that was just a list of 14, there's more. So this is one way of saying to ensure that there's a strong goal, audience, and platform fit. There's a great tendency to say, wow, Snapchat is something that my kids is using. But that doesn't mean it's right for your firm. So avoiding platform FOMO can help. Now, how can you make some decisions on what platforms you might adopt? That brings me to my last topic for today, and that is the social media management framework. Let me be clear. Like I said at the top, this framework is not going to win the Nobel Peace Prize. There are lots of different ways to think about designing social media strategies. I'm offering one way. We're going to go through this, and you're going to say, some of those elements of the framework are really familiar. That's good. Because my overarching message here is that even though we have all these new and innovative social media technologies, when it comes to making the decisions on how to deploy social media within your firm, it's important to be selfish and think about what you're trying to accomplish. Okay? So let me go through this, and hopefully it's helpful as a way to think about what you're doing in digital and social media within your firms or as leaders. So social media management is the ongoing practice of adopting, managing, and measuring social media platforms to achieve business results. A few guiding principles: connection to overall firm strategy. If your social efforts are not laddering back to your firm strategy, then may not be the most efficient use of your time and resources. Integration across the enterprise. This is a tool that can be useful to a wide variety of departments and disciplines, and iteration over time. Now, what we've seen over the last few years is that we're starting as an industry to evolve from a platform-driven to a goal-centric approach. This wasn't always the case. I had the great fortune of working with a lot of smart people and figuring out together how we were going to build a social media business at ESPN. And we started working in it in 2008. And I'm not kidding you, one of the key strategic questions driving all of our efforts was, how do we get Facebook fans? Didn't matter who they were, didn't matter if they liked sports, didn't matter if they watched our network. We needed Facebook fans. To the point where Skittles actually got out to an early lead in the Facebook fan page game. Skittles sort of had a brand personality of the rainbow who had eaten way too much sugar. And we were getting to the point where we're starting to measure ourselves against Skittles, which may not have been the best strategic objective for us. But over time, we did gather more fans, and we said to ourselves, now what? What are we going to do with all of these fans? And across the industry, there was more audience built on Facebook. What are you going to do with all these different fans? And thankfully, executives started to wise up and say, okay, let's not focus on just what the platform defines as success. How many fans you have doesn't mean that's successful. And more of whether you're achieving your organizational goals. And to just give you a sense, if you'll humor me for a minute, of the types of business value you can derive from social media, a lot of this will be familiar to you. But it's helpful in defining the types of strategies you will develop to maximize all the possibilities in social media. So when social media first started, there was a clear business value in brand awareness, right? But over time, as the platforms have evolved, there's also revenue value to obtain, operational value. Some firms are getting very creative in listening to consumer content on social media to influence their supply chain. Some firms are also trying to derive cultural value, which is the bottom left quadrant, where deploying social media strategies to recruit employees, to more effectively engage them and retain them. Just to give you one basic example of how these different forms of value are present in a social media strategy, I want to talk to you about Merriam-Webster on Twitter. Another case that we discussed this semester. Anyone follow Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, on Twitter? It's a good follow. It's a very good follow. Well, they've established themselves with over almost 15,000 tweets, as well as over 400,000 followers. But it's the business value that's at play here. There's brand relevance in their tweets. They have a word of the day every day, and instead of just putting the definition out there, they try to tie it into pop culture or what's happening contextually at the time. This was regarding valedictory, which is apropos of graduation season. They are developing original content to get people to come to their website, where they can then monetize that traffic versus via advertising. They are monitoring the types of words that people are looking up on their website in order to design their content strategy. So the more people look up a certain word, then that's going to inform how they program their website. That's going to inform how they program their Twitter feed. So there's content development and optimization opportunities. And finally, believe it or not, Merriam-Webster, in part because of their success on Twitter, has become somewhat of a cool place to work. Here's an example of an employee on a WNYC podcast explaining the virtues of working at Merriam-Webster, the dictionary. Okay? So there are multiple different ways that Merriam-Webster can achieve value through its Twitter feed: brand relevance, advertising revenue, content development and optimization from an operational standpoint, and cultural value through recruitment and retention. So what does this all mean? How we can pull this all together? I want to share this framework, and then I'll apply it in a couple of examples. So I spent some time talking about the business value of social media because that's really where you start in defining your goals. Are you trying to create brand value? Are you trying to create revenue value, operational value, cultural value? We spend a lot of time in class with our students focusing on the types of goals that you're trying to achieve from an organizational standpoint. Can't emphasize this enough, especially as it relates to social media. Then, after you define your goals, determine the target audiences you want to engage to achieve those goals. Based on your goals and your audiences, what platforms will you adopt to reach and engage those audiences? How will you brand those platforms? Are you going to use your master brand, your sub-brands? Are you going to use the CEO as the head of your social media strategy? For instance, Tesla, through Elon Musk, gets a lot of value through his Twitter feed versus the Tesla Twitter feed. What content will you create that's appropriate to your brand, to the platform, and to the audience? Your distribution strategy. Interestingly, there is a misnomer in social media that all you need to do is put content out there and it will spread. It's important to design a marketing strategy to maximize the engagement and reach of your content. And finally, relative to your goal, how did you perform? Again, these are all fundamental concepts that we operate in every single day. What I'm suggesting is, as it relates to social media and designing a strategy that's appropriate to this space, it can be a helpful exercise to apply these elements and questions to your own efforts. Just to give you a sense of how this framework can be applied in developing strategy, I wanted to talk about Starbucks on WeChat. Do we have any WeChat users in here? Good. I'm happy to see that. By the way, that's more than Twitter. All right. So Starbucks partnered with WeChat on a social gifting feature. This is coming off the heels of a Lunar New Year campaign that WeChat did, where you could gift your friends and family Hongbo, which is a red envelope full of cash. Enormously successful for WeChat, and importantly, tied people's bank accounts to their WeChat account. And so Starbucks is leveraging that built-in user behavior on WeChat for a social gifting feature. So just to briefly show you how this framework can be helpful in analyzing and developing strategy, without a question, Starbucks' goal here is to drive revenue growth in China. Its primary audience, existing customers, those that are already going to the stores, tapping into them to ideally reach new customers, and a tertiary audience here being the media and employees as part of their strategy. Platform, WeChat made a lot of sense for them given the popular social platform that it is and the fact that it has an e-commerce infrastructure. Starbucks didn't decide to go with a different brand or Starbucks China. It's sticking with its master brand in an attempt to appear high quality as well as locally relevant. They came up with an idea called Say It with Starbucks, which is the content. That is, if you have a birthday or an anniversary or something that you want to thank people with, you can say it with Starbucks by gifting some of your friends a Starbucks gift card. Distribution, importantly, this is not a multimedia campaign. This is taking advantage of users to share your message for you. This is peer-to-peer shared media. And finally, how might Starbucks measure this? Through gifts sold and or repeat purchases, okay? So it's a simple example to see how all the elements work together, starting with a very clear goal, all the way through to a social gifting campaign that leads to, ideally, the metrics that they'll track of gifts sold and repeat purchases. So that's one example how you can apply the social media management framework to a firm. Since we have some alums in the room, I also wanted to talk about one of our own, Salit Kula, who I don't think is here, but she is a class of 2015, and an example of how you can also apply some of these same strategic principles to achieve your own leadership and or career goals. So Salit had a finance background, came to Sloan in part to transition into marketing, but wasn't coming here as a former marketing director at a company. She needed to switch careers. And so what she did, she was able to get her an internship at Google, her summer between first and second year. And while she was there, she came up with a selfie-a-day campaign where she would take pictures of herself throughout the Google campus, highlighting the culture, the fact that she loved working there, and importantly, demonstrating her skills as a social media communicator. Now, I'm not suggesting that this campaign was the sole reason why Salit ended up getting hired. She's highly intellectual, highly skilled, an excellent representative for MIT Sloan. However, she wasn't the only intern there. And by doing this Google selfie-a-day campaign, it differentiated her from others potentially like her. And in fact, Larry Page actually +1'd or liked this post, which was a nice vote of confidence. So to apply the framework to Salit, her goal was to get a Google marketing position. Her audience was decision makers and colleagues. Her platform was Google+. Her brand was to be a digital savvy, innovative marketer. She came up with this content campaign of a Google internship selfie campaign. She did it daily. She distributed it daily. And in the end, for her, what the measurement was a Gmail product marketing job offer. She's now currently the head of Gmail marketing at Google as well. So she was able to use this as a nice complementary career strategy to achieve her career goals. So hats off to Salit, who has innovated in using social media for your career. Any questions on the framework? Yes, please.
Does the framework apply to all industries?
Yes. So, for instance, if you would look at a B2B company, for instance, we do a case in class on Maersk Line, the shipping company, and how they have been able to use social media to reach B2B clients and ultimately drive more leads and more revenue as a result. So this framework is flexible enough to apply to different firms, large, small, as well as across different disciplines. And in fact, in our class, we have each of our project teams work through this framework for a wide variety of businesses. This spring, we had a startup, for instance, coming from MIT about Internet of Things security called Neuromesh that applied this framework, as well as a startup in Airbnb for weddings that applied this framework as well. So it has that flexibility depending on the industry, firm, or objective. All right, well, I just figured I'd wrap up, and we can get into any remaining questions that you might have. I will say that in social media, change is constant. And whether you touch digital or social at your firm or not, I highly recommend tapping one person at your firm to be in charge of an ongoing social media audit. If I did platform trends and possibilities again next year, it's going to be completely different. So having someone audit the current trends across platforms is critical because things do change quite a bit. In fact, there's a new field. It's called internet archaeology. And there's actually been some pretty amazing discoveries in this field.
Last month, internet archaeologist Dr. Maxwell Fry stumbled upon the perfectly preserved ruins of an online community called Friendster. Dr. Fry, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Dr. Fry, tell us about this amazing discovery of yours.
Well, it was called Friendster, and at its peak, it was a vibrant social network with more than 50 million members.
50 million?
That's right. But then, out of the blue, the civilization just ended.
Oh.
And the site was completely abandoned.
Strange.
One day, Friendster users were posting a seemingly endless stream of bulletins about awesome parties and cool shows, and then nothing.
That is
Total
so
silence.
eerie.
Today, the ruins of the site remain perfectly preserved as they were at the time of Friendster's demise, sometime around mid to late 2004 AD.
Wow. Their lives just come to a complete stop, like a fly trapped in amber.
Exactly.
It's really beautiful. You can see how much work went into
Now,
it.
you just made this amazing discovery just by looking through an old desktop's browser history?
That's right. And as soon as I entered the site, I knew I was the first human being to lay eyes on those pages in many, many years.
There must be so much to learn from the remnants of this site.
There is. Evidence suggests Friendster users or friends who were a simple people, spending most of their time gathering the names of bands to display on large ornamental favorite music lists.
Ooh, I'm getting chills just looking at it.
Birthdays were important to them, just as they are to us today, but they revered something called 6 feet under, as well as the Shins. They also prize photos of themselves drinking.
Everyone looks so happy.
Such a mystery.
So what happened to Friendster?
Well, no singular explanation is universally accepted. Some of my colleagues believe that a computer virus may have wiped out a large portion of the Friendster users and then the rest fled their accounts out of fear.
Oh, no.
Others believe that Friendster was only meant to exist temporarily, to fill a void left by another mysterious civilization known as All, or perhaps Aul.
Wow.
Now, if the public is interested, they can go to visit the ruins of the website at www.friendster.com. All we ask is that they don't alter any content. They
Right.
leave the site just as they found it.
Of course. Well, thank you, Dr. Fry, for being our guest.
Well, thank you.
All right. So to summarize here, a few takeaways. Look, platform change is a constant. Platforms will come and go. They'll evolve. But what we've tried to hit on today is a few takeaways that regardless of what the platforms are, hopefully these will be helpful to you and your firms. The first is we talked about the new digital persuasion context. It's two-way, it's public, it's immediate, it's networked, it's visual, and it's disintermediated. In that context, designing brands, products, services, and experiences that people will share with their networks is a winning strategy, and it's where a lot of our thinking ought to go. We also talked about platform trends, and the takeaway there is, at the risk of going a little bit too catchy, wanted to go with avoid platform FOMO. But realistically, there's so many different possibilities out there. Ensuring that there's a strong goal, audience, and platform fit is absolutely critical. And then finally, we talked about the social media management framework, which again is one way of designing social media strategy. and it encourages you to think about what your clear goals are, who your audience is, what your platforms might be, the content distribution that you would design as well as your brand, and how you would measure relative to your goals. Those types of concepts will again be timeless regardless of what the platforms are there. I do want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I can just tell you that it is a true honor to be at MIT Sloan. I've been here for 3 years, as I mentioned at the top, and there is nothing like coming into the classroom and working with our students and collaborating with them and learning along the way. And I'm just so grateful that you all were here and spent this time with me. It is a true joy, and I want to thank you with a cat. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your time in Boston.